and welcome to the In the Moment magazine podcast. I'm Sarah Orme, and today's guest is Francine Russell, who is a food consultant, coach and mindfulness practitioner. Hello.
Morning, Sarah.
So today we're going to be talking a bit about mindful eating. So could you tell us what that is?
Yes, sure. Mindful eating, like other mindful activities, is when you bring an awareness to the activity that you're doing. So in the case of mindful eating, the key is to come out of autopilot. If you think about food that you eat, you're on the hoof, perhaps at your laptop, watching TV, chatting to friends or on the phone. You're eating, but you're not really thinking often about what you're really doing. And if I said to you, can you recall that sandwich you had last night, you may well not be able to recall the taste, the texture. You may have enjoyed it, but having a presence and awareness around the activity and in that moment is a very different experience.
So you're saying when I'm watching TV and eating, perhaps that's not so good for me because I'm not really paying attention to what's going in. In fact, I can't even remember what I had for tea last night.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's not good, but I'm saying that if you want to bring mindful eating into your life, we do this all the time, eating and doing things. I mean, we're all very busy. And what I would say is it just brings a different experience when you actually pay attention. When you're watching TV, we often have TV dinners and we think at the end, well, what was that food about? I was more interested in the programme. So had I turned the programme off and actually concentrated on what I was doing, and I'll go into that in a bit, it's a different, more embellished and actually probably a more connected experience.
What would you say the benefits are then of eating mindfully? What do you gain from it?
I think it's on different levels. So, from a maybe health and well-being point of view, eating slower and actually digesting food is much better. I know I can only speak for me and maybe the people that I work with who have fed back to me that by eating slower, they possibly eat less. I'm not promoting dieting at all, but what I'm saying is I realise I'm full, actually, and I'm not just eating and grazing. So when I'm actually thinking about mindful eating and health and well-being, I would say definitely I snack less when I'm in the moment of mindful eating. Digestion-wise, I feel better about the food I digest and I feel full, probably quicker, not always, but I'm aware of it. I feel more connected. I make the eating process calmer. And I think also there's a real sense of well-being around self-care. So being aware of what I'm putting in my mouth, the choices I make, and that can go through to shopping, eating and cooking, which we may talk about in a bit. It's like a tick box. It's connection, it's calm, it's grounding, but it doesn't have to be slow. So that's also a point to make.
Okay, so is it something that you would do with every meal?
What I would say, there's no should and there are no rules. Just like bringing mindfulness into your life, if you want to bring mindful eating into your life, I would say you do it when you want to. And the thing about mindfulness is being compassionate to yourself and non-judgmental. You could do it at every meal. And, for example, if you wanted to start mindful eating, I would say, for example, you want to do it in the office today at your desk. You could actually drink a coffee mindfully. So how would that be? You drink the coffee, you're at your desk, but actually you're paying attention to the coffee, the liquid, the temperature, the strength of the brew, say, for example, if it's got milk, if it hasn't, if it's sweet or not. Even down to maybe the cup, the lip of the cup, because you know how we have fine china for tea and maybe a thicker lipped cup for coffee. And that there's a difference in the taste when you have a different, receptacle that you're drinking from. So to answer your question, you can start as small as you want and it doesn't have to be big and daily or routine. It's, what I would say is start with a beginner's mind. So what I mean by that is let go of the expectation and the expert mind and see it through a different lens and don't be harsh on yourself.
Okay, so where would you start to do that? How would you begin to eat mindfully?
Okay, so as I said, you could start by bringing something like a drink at work, or I used to sit, when I worked in London, I used to sit on the tube and I used to eat an apple mindfully. So just to give an example, I'm on a really busy tube really noisy. And each week I did one mindful activity just to introduce it to my life. I thought, let's just flip this over a bit and see how this works. And I'd be sitting on the tube, eating this apple, crunching away, and would be aware, oh God, can they hear me crunching this? Because this sounds really loud. Aware of the texture, aware of the sort of, if it's something like a Granny Smith, it was a bit tart, a bit sour. And then thinking, God, I'm sticky. Being aware of something completely different than sitting next to somebody on the tube and reading their Evening Standard, for example, over their shoulder. So you can start as small as you want. I would say there's lots of different ways to start, and it depends how much you want to kind of bring it into your life. Planning and shopping, that's a really good way of doing it, because actually mindfully thinking about what you want to eat and where you're going to source the food, that's mindful. How you're going to cook it, we can talk about that in a moment. So I'd say sort of bite-sized chunks and gentle on yourself, and actually enjoy and just see. The big thing about all of this is noticing the difference. So if that makes sense. So if you drank a cup of coffee mindfully, that might be a whole different experience to just drinking your coffee without that intention.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be quite hard, perhaps, to do initially, because I know when you're in an office and you're busy working, it's quite easy to just eat a snack or drink a drink and it's kind of gone, and you're just like, oh, where's my cup of tea gone? And you've drunk it just completely without thinking about it.
Absolutely.
So I can see that it might be a challenge initially to try and focus yourself on it. I mean, particularly if you're doing it somewhere noisy, like as you say, on the tube, it might be, you might get perhaps a bit overwhelmed with the other things that are going on. So how do you block out what's going on around you?
Okay, so the thing is to set the intention of doing it. And in a way, for me, the example of the apple on the tube, that was the learning for me at that time. It was very much around, where can I do this? It was playing around with it a little bit and mixing it up. What I really want to impress upon you and the listeners as well is that it doesn't have to be in a perfect place, a perfect time, and a perfect setting. When we practice mindfulness on a daily basis, we can do a 1-minute breathing exercise anywhere. It does not have to be in this ideal room with a beautiful candle and a view. And actually, mindful activity can be brought into a daily routine, and you still do get the benefits.
Yeah.
So if you set an intention, for example, to eat a sandwich or a salad, whatever you had for your break, and you want to do it a weekday and you're at work, you could plan by going outside for a time span of whatever, 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, depends whatever you want, and actually sit and really be there for the food. So what we say is the food is there for you, be there for the food. And what I mean by that is actually experiencing what you're doing in that moment. And you see and feel and sense different things. So, for example, I might smell the sandwich. If there was cucumber, it smells fresh. When I'm eating the bread, I feel the texture of maybe a whole grain, if it was whole grain bread. The creaminess of something like maybe a mayonnaise, if there was that in there. But all of the senses come into play, and also visually. Visually, that's really key. It makes it a different experience, a definitely more appreciative experience.
So would you say you actually enjoy the food more when you're eating it mindfully?
I would say definitely. And I would say if we think about the kind of meals that we make for celebrations, say, for example, I've been in the food business many years, okay, and a typical example is we might make a meal in a kitchen, I'm teaching, and at the end, we all taste it. Now, when we taste food that's been made specially for a purpose or an event or after a class and people really want to get to see what that's all about, that's a really mindful actual practice. So thinking about tasting something, for example, you go out for a special occasion. It's a nice big meal out at a restaurant you've always wanted to be at. You look at the food very differently. So you might look at the menu and think, where's the food come from? You might think, who's prepared the food? You might think, when it gets there, God, that looks beautiful on a plate. The colours are great. You start eating the food, the texture. You're very present for that meal. So if you think about that, that is really a mindful experience.
Yes, it is. In the past, I've worked as a food writer, so when you are eating a meal that you're meant to be reviewing, you do think about it differently. And actually, I suppose it's quite similar to mindfulness in that you're looking at the colours, you're looking at how everything is arranged on the plate, but you're also thinking about the care that's gone into it as well. So what the story is behind it, where has this food come from, how has it been sourced? And these things work so well together.
Yeah.
But it does seem that ties in really well with mindfulness as well.
Absolutely. And it's true that those are memories that you can recall quite easily. And as you said at the beginning, you don't even remember what you had to eat. Was it last night you said
Yes.
that? Had that been a special meal out or a mindful experience that you set an intention to do, you probably would have remembered.
Well, that's true, yes. If you go for a special meal at a restaurant or somewhere like that, you do tend to remember it. Or if it was a special meal that you cooked for a friend, a family member.
Absolutely.
You remember the process of cooking it, how you cooked it, what you felt like as well.
Yeah.
The emotion is so important.
Absolutely. And emotion, and I think there is such a feel-good factor around feeling good for yourself and also, when you're eating it. Can I talk a bit about cooking?
Oh, yes, of course.
Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, let's talk about cooking.
Let's talk about cooking. So mindful cooking goes, obviously, it goes well with mindful eating. And again, I really want to impress that it doesn't have to be big. It can start small. Mindful activities. So, for example, if you were making, a vegetable salad, for example, you could set an intention to put out the veg on a chopping board. You'd be aware of the veg, the colours, get a really nice knife that's sharp and enjoy the chopping. That alone can be a mindful experience completely. Now, it works well. I'd say it does work better if probably you're in a space where the music isn't blaring, glass of wine on the side, laptop in the corner, mobile, pinging all the time.
Yes, if there's not kids running around, if you don't have a cat that wants to be fed or whatever else is in the way.
Yeah. It is like setting a meditation for yourself, but doing something with it. Making bread. Baking bread is a lovely thing to do. Put out all the ingredients, the weighing, then the textures. Even listening to pouring your water into a bowl, into the flour. Watching it rise, the proving, the shaping, the kneading.
The kneading is very relaxing, isn't it?
It's relaxing, but also you can really... if I said to you, what do your thumbs feel like when you're kneading? What's the feeling in your arms, your hands? It may not always be positive. You might have been to the gym the night before and think, oh my God, I'm exhausted. But you're aware. It's an awareness practice. And I think it does give it, it embellishes it, and you look at it through a different lens, if that makes sense. You see it as more of a full experience. And I think when I cook mindfully, and I don't cook mindfully every day, and I would say to people, try it and see. And you can make it as small as you want. It could be slicing a cucumber, the freshness of the smell, enjoying a new piece of equipment, as I said, something like a knife or a chopping board, or a whole meal. It's a really nice thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in my case, I find it particularly special when you're preparing it for somebody else as well.
Absolutely.
Because then you've got the anticipation that you're going to enjoy it with somebody, and it just makes the whole thing more special, I think.
I think cooking and nurturing and nourishing people, yourself included, is a very loving thing to do, to be honest, without sounding flaky. Yeah, really. It's, cooking is a very therapeutic thing. Added to it, as you said earlier, the provenance of the food, thinking about where you get the food from, and also the care that you put into the food, as well as all of the other things that are going on when you're actually present in that moment, really makes it for a very different experience.
Yeah, it's quite an act of self-love as well, isn't it? That you're taking the care to prepare this food for yourself.
Yes.
And it's not just, I need to eat something, and you're not really caring about it. It's actually that you're looking after yourself as well.
Exactly. So it's like self-love, self-care. There's a lot of tick boxes, isn't it?
It is. It's all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, it doesn't always have to be healthy either, does it?
No, I mean, what does healthy mean? I think it has it's got a bad rep, health, and I agree with you. It can be as indulgent as you want. We all make our food choices ourselves, and I think, the other thing about being mindful, back to the health and well-being, yes, you can choose things. You might make different food choices when you're being mindful. It doesn't have to mean their health. It means they're just different.
Yes, I mean, I came across a really good exercise for, I think it was chocolate meditation. It was eating chocolate mindfully. And I thought, well, that really appeals to me.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
who doesn't want to do that?
Absolutely.
But, especially if the chocolate is like a special treat, you're going to get more enjoyment out of it.
Absolutely. No, I think for me, and I understand from you, food and eating is a real pleasure. And I think that this experience can embellish it. But it needn't be every day. There's something you can try and, just experiment with it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if you're in a rush, I guess, in a hurry, you're just like, oh, I just need to eat something quickly. And perhaps that's not the time to be mindful. And perhaps it's better saved for a time when you can actually really enjoy it.
Absolutely. I mean, if people want to bring mindfulness into their life and they don't have time to do the mindfulness practice, this is a different practice through food. Absolutely. Like gardening, growing. I mean, growing food and then picking and cooking food is a beautiful mindful practice to, take part in.
Yeah, it can be like a whole process, can't it?
Absolutely,
I mean, personally,
yes.
I've just started gardening, so I've got the novelty of growing herbs and
Fantastic.
picking them and cutting them up and using them in my food, and that's a real pleasure as well. So I guess it's different forms of mindfulness suit different people. And it's finding what suits you, really.
Absolutely. And I do think because your kind of awareness is heightened, you do notice things that you haven't noticed before. For sure. In the garden, I grew tomatoes for the first time last year, and I really enjoyed it. And like you, herbs too. And I noticed, the way the tomatoes look, and they smelt so different when I grew them. And it's a real feel-good thing, definitely. I am sure there is serotonin being released when I'm smelling those tomatoes and smiling at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you're putting some love back into them as well, helping them grow.
Maybe.
Who knows? But the good thing about that as well is that you don't need a lot of space, because you can just have a herb garden in your window. It's such an easy thing to do.
Absolutely. Yes, you can. Yeah, at the moment I'm growing oregano and chives, just two things. And yes, and basil. And the smells, again, that's just, yes, I find it really satisfying. But as you say, with all of this, you don't need special space. You don't need lots of time. There's no constraint on it, because I think when I started mindfulness practice, I thought to myself, I don't have the time for any of this. And actually, yes, I do. And it's not about making extra time. It's about incorporating it into your daily life.
Okay, so that's all been really interesting. And now we're going to have a go at a mindful eating exercise. And this is one you can have a go at home as well. So, Francine, I think you've bought some strawberries in.
I have.
Okay, so do you want to talk me through what we're going to do?
Okay, and before we start, what we talk about in mindfulness a lot is pausing. So what I'm going to say is because we've been in an interview, and now I'm going to hopefully, with your help, lead you through an activity. I'm going to say to you, Sarah, so just for a moment, let's both pause.
Okay.
Okay.
Pausing.
How are you feeling at this moment?
I'm feeling quite chilled out, I think.
Okay. So what we call, you don't have to do this at home, but because we've been talking, I just want to go through the whole process. And what we call this is grounding, just to see where you are right now. So feet on the floor and feeling the pressure of your body in the chair. And maybe just take a couple of deep breaths in and out. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. You don't have to do this at home exactly, but it's just to move it from one thing to another. So, Sarah, I have got a box of strawberries here. I'm going to pick one, and I'd like you to pick one too.
Thank you. This one looks like a nice one. Nice shiny strawberry.
They're nice British strawberries. So now I'd like you to eat it.
Okay. Sorry for any eating noises on the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice juicy strawberry.
Okay. Now, how was that? Anything else you noticed about that strawberry just from that experience?
I'd say there's a little bit of sharpness, as there quite often is with strawberries. Mm-hmm. See, what else do I notice about it? It's a nice glossy-looking strawberry. It's very shiny. It's quite smooth to touch. And, of course, there's a smell as well, which is very nice, very summery.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's
Okay.
quite juicy as well, I can see.
Okay. I want you to take another strawberry.
Okay.
You've nearly finished that one, I know.
I'll put that one down. Right, I'll take another one.
And I just want you to, just for a moment, go on a journey with me.
Okay.
Hold the strawberry in your hand. I want you to have a look at that strawberry. So this strawberry came from Hereford. I picked it up at a greengrocer's on the way in today. And I would imagine that it was probably grown in a polytunnel somewhere in a field in Hereford. And it was taken care of by people who watered it and looked after it. It grew from a seedling into a strawberry plant. And thinking about the people that actually looked after it, I think they might be there in that polytunnel. And as it grew, they picked this strawberry. And just for a moment, we're just going to think about this strawberry having come from Hereford, being taken care of by a group of people, watered, there was probably sunshine, hopefully, a bit of warmth, and then it was picked. Strawberry was then packed and transported. So we're in Bristol today, and it was probably transported to the fruit market in Bristol. So it went on a bit of a journey and then finally ended up in the shop where I bought it today on the way in here. And now it's sitting in your hand. Just think about this strawberry and think about all the energy and resource that went into bringing this strawberry here today. And now I want you to really look at that, really smell that strawberry. And when you're ready, I'd like you to taste that strawberry. So what I'd ask you now is,
Yes.
What's the difference? What did you notice?
I would say I did notice a lot more this time about the texture of it, actually.
Okay.
That's something I was paying a lot more attention to, and a lot more attention to the flavour as well. The smell, like before you bite into it, it's not particularly strong, actually. That becomes stronger once you've actually bitten into it.
Yes.
So it is, you are paying more attention to the fruit itself. And it's interesting as well to think about where it's come from, what the story is behind it, because perhaps we don't always think about that when we're consuming food, where it's actually come from. It's just a case of grabbing it off the shelf and thinking, oh, those tomatoes will do. But once you put a bit of thought into where it's come from and the care, yes, it does make a difference to how you eat it.
Absolutely. And it was interesting you said that we consume food, and that is what we do. We do consume. And I think when we want to get out of that, we want to eat rather than consume. And I think that may be a difference. You know, it's like being present and eating. I think it's a very simple practice to do. I mean, obviously we were in a studio today, so I couldn't bring in a whole meal, and it's a very easy thing to do. And you can do it with children as well, actually. It's just noticing the difference. And what it does is you sort of really dial up the experience. We're on a podcast now, so I didn't want there to be lots of really long silences. But if I was doing it with a group of people, I'd probably take it a little bit slower. But I thought I better not. Otherwise, people think we were off air.
Yeah, people might think something had gone wrong.
Exactly. But it's interesting, isn't it? Just something simple like a strawberry. Everything we eat has a backstory and has a whole journey and all sorts of, and in mindfulness, we think about the labour that went into it. And actually, in some places, maybe the hardship even that people go through, through the work that they're doing in picking or whatever. It's a whole mindfulness experience to think about energy, resource, love, care.
Yes, and I suppose as well it makes you less likely to waste your food if you're really appreciating it and really thinking about where it comes from.
I'm really glad you picked up on that, because that's true. And energy, resource and waste is something that's really key in mindfulness practice for sure. Yes.
Okay, well, I think that is probably a good place to wind up, and I hope the people listening will have a go and try this for themselves at home. Go get yourself some strawberries or whatever other food you like to eat, chocolate. It's up to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Francine, where can people follow you online?
Online, I'm on Instagram, Francine Foodie, and also on Twitter, Francine Food. And I run a consultancy called All About Food.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for inviting me in, Sarah.
If you've tried mindful eating yourself after listening to this podcast, we'd really love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram @InTheMomentMag, or you can email us on calmmoment@immediate.co.uk. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to Vicky R1980 for your review on iTunes. We really do appreciate any ratings or reviews as it helps more people to find the podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and we'll be back again very soon.